Spurg here with my co-host, Zach Quartz, to welcome you to the season finale of Highside, Lowside. We are wrapping up season 6. And as always, we're going to hit on some not the news with some information about Royal Enfield and some of the stuff they're doing. But the story of the episode today is that we have Jeremiah Burton from Donut Media on as our guest. And like we do with every season finale, we go through and we're going to throw some questions at Jeremiah that we hit on throughout the season. We're then going to keep him on for the engine sound guessing game. We've got a special viewer comment that we're going to have Jeremiah weigh in on, and then we're going to say goodbye to him, and we're going to give away a t-shirt as always. But before we do any of that, Zach, what are we going to do?
We are going to give a tip of the cap to our friends over at Motul. Now, I've got a question for you, Highside, Lowside viewers and listeners. When was the last time you cleaned your chain or changed your oil or maintained your motorcycle? Was it before season 6 of Highside, Lowside started? Because if so, you might be due. And when you maintain your motorcycle, whether it's changing the oil, cleaning the chain, or just giving it a good old polish, you can use Motul products, because then you'll be supporting Highside, Lowside. And you can find any and all Motul products for sale at RevZilla.com/Motul. That's RevZilla.com/MOTUL.
And if you want to save a little bit of money on everything from Motul to helmets, jackets, and gloves and boots and everything in between, while you're over there, you can head over to RevZilla.com/RPM. And if you check out the RPM membership, there's cashback offers, there's special discounts you can get on motorcycle gear. It's our way of kind of furthering the RevZilla community. And one of the things that is an additional perk on that is the Common Tread Journal, which is a print magazine that Zach Quartz and myself help write and produce, and there will be another issue coming out this spring. So there's definitely something to look forward to if you are an RPM member. So head over to RevZilla.com/RPM.
Okie dokie, everybody. As we dive into episode 12 of season 6, we of course need to touch on Nyet the news, as they say in Russia. This time around, Royal Enfield buys a 10% stake in Stark Varg. So if you don't know who Royal Enfield is, who they are, Royal Enfield is one of the oldest manufacturers of motorcycles in the world, of course, based out of India. And that company has purchased its 10% stake in Stark Ventures, or I forget what the company's called exactly, but they're producing an all-electric motocross bike called the Varg.
Which we've talked about on Highside, Lowside before.
Which we have. I believe we called the bluff of when the Stark Varg would be available. And I think early season 7, coming up here, spring 2023, is when we will see who was right, Stark Varg or Spurg and Zack. Point being, very old manufacturer of sort of classic air-cooled mostly motorcycles, in fact maybe entirely air-cooled motorcycles, has purchased a stake in an electric motorcycle company. And this is interesting, right, Spurg, for sort of a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see exactly what Royal Enfield, is thinking about from a future standpoint, and where they're planning on taking their investments. Because up until this point, for anyone that's listening that might not be familiar, Royal Enfield's technology, when compared to other manufacturers out there, might appear a bit antiquated. They really do build engines in a simple, historical way, and there's not a lot of innovation coming through from the basics of what they're doing. So for them to go after a very forward-thinking, electric motorcycle company that's talking about being able to have your cell phone integrated as the dash and all these other features, I think it's going to be, a question as to is that how they see their investment into the future of motorcycling? Are they, instead of just doing ground up engineering on their own terms, are they planning on buying the technology from somebody else?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's super interesting, and I wonder, it's also interesting from the standpoint of the finances of it, right? That this that there might be at some point a shift where all electric vehicle companies will have more clout than classic internal combustion engined vehicle companies, but we're still at the point where the old world has more might than the new world, so to speak. And it's certainly forward thinking of Royal Enfield to invest whatever it was, I think 50 million euros in this sort of all electric startup. So I don't know. I guess I want to put this to you, Spurg. Good call or bad call? Are you pro this move? Do you think it's a good call on Royal Enfield's part? Do you think it's the right thing to do, or do you think it's just sort of like an oddball oil and water kind of matchup?
I think it could be. I think it could be the right move for them, depending on how they use their investment. Here's where my question comes into play. We talked about they bought a 10% stake, and then you threw the number out. The number was 50 million euros. You and I have historically looked at a lot of these companies that pop up, and one of our biggest critiques is like, I'll believe it when I see it. And that was one of our biggest critiques when Stark introduced the Varg. Now, they introduced the Varg, we're like, we'll believe it when we see it. We did get invited to a press launch. We have an article up on Common Tread from the press launch of the Varg, but we still don't have a bike produced. There's still not a bike that you can go out today and buy, to my knowledge. So how did they determine that 10% of the company is worth $50 million? Like that's where I don't know if Indians plan with funny money or not here when you're looking at that kind of a number.
Yeah, fair enough. I think there's probably a financial podcast that's better to explain how companies' valuations are determined, and that's literally quite literally a whole other podcast if you want the answer to that question, I suppose. But it is interesting to wonder, how someone at Royal Enfield thought it made sense to spend that kind of money on a manufacturer that hasn't, frankly, done a lot of manufacturing yet. It does show, I think, a little. It's a small window into the minds of people at companies that have been historically successful with gasoline engines, which is that they feel change coming. Yeah. And there are certain companies that are trying to position the pieces, Harley Davidson with Livewire. That's the only other example I can think of. But there are certainly other companies that are moving in this direction, and you can tell that the corporate culture is one of those like, well, we have at least one eye on that industry and what's happening there. And I think that I don't have a super strong opinion about it, except that I'm curious to see how it shakes out.
Well, you have Harley Davidson that bought Alta. I mean, you have that example. You've got
and Victory bought Bramo, or Polaris bought Bramo. Although those previous marriages were not. Hopefully, let's just say, Stark Varg does better with an investment from Royal Enfield than Alta did from being purchased by Harley Davidson, or Bramo did from being purchased by Polaris. But
that's my point in making the comment, right? So my hope here is that what we're seeing happen is a partnership where Royal Enfield is going to come in and say, "Hey, we've got the manufacturing technology. You've got the technology, and you've developed this product. We can now help you mass produce it." And that's where we think we can lend a hand. And that's where I'm hoping that this marriage comes into play. Not that Royal Enfield is trying to buy Stark to put him out of commission or to, do away with them, but that they're saying, hey, we think that we can help you get a viable product to market, and that product is going to lead to even bigger things. That's what I'm hopeful for with this.
Right. Yeah. Well, we hope that you have an opinion about it too, dear viewer / listener. And I think that, like I said, I'm just excited to see how it transitions and how it goes and how all of this evolves, because it seems exciting. And I feel like the idea that smaller companies like this who have sort of innovative ideas that people are excited about are getting funding from big companies that have had success in the past. And it seems like, I just hope that the rising tide lifts all ships.
You know what I'm excited about?
Tell me.
I'm excited about Jeremiah Burton. And
yes,
while
indeed.
I think we've done a good job giving the audience something to noodle over, I think it's time we get Jeremiah Burton on here and we talk about motorcycles and we put him through the ringer on some of these questions that we have for him.
I think that sounds like a great idea. Let's get him in here. Okie dokie, everybody. There he is, the man himself, Jeremiah Burton of Donut Media. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, man.
Dude, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to chat it up with you guys.
Right on. Okay, well, as is customary with Highside, Lowside guests, especially ones as high profile as yourself, we like to do a lightning round of questions to help the audience get to know you a little better. In this case, of course, people should know who the heck you are, but we're just going to jump into some real simple questions here that we have not shown to you, just so the audience knows, but they're softballs. You should be able to handle them nice and easy. Spurg, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I think, Donut Media far and large has a really strong, car following. You have kind of, etched out a little niche for yourself with some of the motorcycle content that, you've been creating. So our first question is, how did you get into motorcycling? And subsequently then, what was your first bike or some of the other bikes in that line?
Yeah, so I got into dirt bikes. That was my first motorcycle. Was a TTR 125. I think I was 12. I was a big 12-year-old. So my dad opted for the TTR 125. I was a Florida boy. Grew up in the sandy center region of Florida, Melbourne, Florida, and they just a lot of kind of like turn tracks and stuff out there. And I had some buddies who had some motorcycles, and so I was like, "Hey, Dad, I gotta get in on this two-wheel thing. This looks pretty sick." And so yeah, he got me a bike. He then left and went over to France for work for a couple weeks and was like, "Hey, you can't ride it. Okay, it's got to sit in the garage," which lasted all of a day. And I snuck it out of the garage, and I would. In Florida, they have these ditches with coal, and the driveways go over them, and you can kind of jump them. They're like mini jumps. So that was.
I'm sure that's what they were designed for, right?
Yeah.
By
Yes.
the engineers, yeah.
Yes, they were like, "Hey, how can we be able to transport a bunch of water to lakes, but also have 12-year-olds huck these motorcycles at the same time?" So
Right.
that's how I learned how to ride and jump, is on the side of a road in Florida over these kind of culvert things. So yeah, that was my first bike. That's how I got into motorcycling. From then on, I grew 6 or 7 inches that summer, and then I progressed to a YZ 125. My favorite motorcycle to this day. I love 125s. I still have one. I ride them a whole bunch, and then raced a little bit motocross out in what was called Bifflo at the time. I don't know what it's called anymore, but in Orlando, Florida, raced a whole bunch out there, and then got hurt a whole bunch, and then kind of chalked it up for a little while until I went to college and got into street bikes a little bit after that. But yeah, that's how it all started, with the old TTR 125, which I still have to this day. It's at my parents'.
Oh wow!
You have the bike?
Original bike. Yep,
Wow.
the original bike. And it ran up until last year when I was doing wheelies, and then I forgot that it was burning oil, and I forgot, well, when an engine burns oil, you usually have to replace it with more new oil. And I didn't do that. And so I locked the engine up. But it ran for a good 20 years, and I just got to rebuild it. But
When you go back to your parents now, and do your parents have to be home for you to ride it, or are you allowed to ride it without their supervision?
yeah, funny enough, my mom still has the rule, hey, if your dad's not around, you can't ride this motorcycle. It's a real pain in the ass. Yeah.
Well, next question: how do you spend the majority of your time riding now? What's your sort of I don't know, your relationship with motorcycles currently?
Yeah, in the spring, summer months, I'll ride about once or twice a week, usually motocross here at some of the, we have some of the best tracks in Southern California. So I'll hit all the kind of local tracks once or twice a week. And then I've kind of offset that. I've started to get into tracking motorcycles or road bikes now within the last year and a half or so.
Okay.
I've always been a street rider, but I've fell into this wanting to go super fast around a track, kind of from the car thing. I've always had cars that I've taken on track, and always envied the motorcycle guys because it's more dangerous. You look cooler. They're just better. So
Nice. Really fluffing our egos here. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So So I'll try to do a couple track days a month if I can fit it in and find the time. Because I gotta get better. I've seen Zach ride. You're quick, man, and I'm like, hey, I gotta somehow be able to like roll up on you one day and be like, I can be competitive against this guy in something that doesn't matter.
That's how we all feel. Like Zach is like the measure, the yardstick in which we all measure ourselves by.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure if we rode on a motocross track, it would be quite the opposite. That's all I have to say about that. I'm sure I would eat your dust for about 10 seconds and then I wouldn't see you the rest of the day. So, it's all about what we grew up doing, I suppose.
Sure.
Next question to try and keep this lightning round as lightning as possible. Were you the first person to do motorcycle content at Donut? I guess that's a yes or no question.
Yeah,
there was one video that I found with James, and I think that was titled "Motorcycles Need to Chill Out," which was kind of like motorcycles are way too fast. And then there was you.
Yeah. So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but when I first started at Donut, they hired me as a host, but the show they wanted me to run was kind of in this limbo phase, and they couldn't really figure out the creative around it. So they were like, hey, while we figure this out, do you want to be a writer? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll write. And that turned into about a year long of me writing for James. And a lot of the stuff that was motorcycle or early motorcycle stuff on Donut were ideas that I pitched and had James do. So I wrote those scripts.
Gotcha.
So they're kind of, my influence is there. So yeah, James was the one who was able to present them, but I was the guy who was like, hey, we should do some motorcycle stuff here.
Right. So it wasn't necessarily your face, but it was your influence and your, okay, cool. That's,
I think we did a couple of, I can't remember what our first motorcycle was. It might have been Harley Davidson or Ducati or an Up to Speed, one of those, and those really blew up, and that kind of was the good for me because I was like, hey guys, see, there's a market for this. There's some some people out here who are interested in this as well.
Totally. Yeah.
So out of all, and obviously, you have a wide, swath of different videos and different types of vehicles that you've presented over the years. Out of all the videos that you have created, maybe around motorcycling specifically, whether it's ones that you hosted or ones that you helped write and create, what is your favorite one and why?
Yeah, okay. So my favorite one is probably the Up to Speed on Harley Davidson. And my face isn't in it, but my words are there. And it was one of my favorite scripts because I got to, go through this history of a company that has had, it's massive. It's been around for so long, 100 plus years, and they just have, extensive amount of bikes. So I probably worked on that script for way too long. Usually you're supposed to write a script in about a week, and I probably took 2.5 because I was just like, there's so much to kind of like go through. And I sat down with one of our writers at the time, and we all kind of know each other through the comedy world. So we're all comedy writers first, and then kind of like gearheads second in a sense. And so we got to put a lot of fun jokes in that script, and it kind of made it into this very funny piece. And it's just there's a lot of jokes in there that I really like and hold near and dear to my heart as a comedy nerd. But so that's what I would say. Yeah, I would say that Harley Davidson Up to Speed, which did really well in terms of like performance for a video. I mean, I think it has like 2 or 3 million views still on YouTube, which is great.
Right. Yeah. And so you actually bring up an interesting point. And we didn't tailor the lightning round questions quite specifically enough to get into this part of your background, but you, I'll let you correct me, but very quickly, you went to engineering school, I believe, and then you moved to LA to do stand-up comedy to a certain extent. Is that right?
Yeah. So I went to school. I was a mechanical engineer, got my degree in that. Then went to graduate school for biomedical engineering, and then I wanted to go to med school, but I was like, I got to go to.
But doctors don't make enough money, so I'm going to be a YouTube writer.
Your parents must be so proud.
Oh my God, my mom is like, "What are you doing? You wasted your degree." I was like, so after I graduated, I want to go be a doctor, but I wanted to be in LA because I was like, before I go spend another 8 years in college trying to go be a doctor. I always wanted to be a comedian. I wanted to write in comedy and perform stand-up and sketch and all that stuff. So I was like, let me go to L.A., I'll get a job in LA, and then at night I'll take classes and, audition, do all this kind of like very LA Hollywood stuff and figure it out. Well, it took me like 2 weeks to be like, yeah, I don't want to be a doctor. And so I kind of, I worked for about 5 years at a engineering company here in Los Angeles. And then, then I was like, all right, I'm done with this. It's time to go full Hollywood and do the YouTube thing.
Oh, man. Tinseltown poisons another soul. poor Jeremiah sucked into the vortex.
I look at it as like, so I was doing stem cell engineering. It was like cardiac stem. I might have told you this, Zach. I don't remember when you came to the office at one time, but we were doing, cardiac. This isn't lightning round, by the way. I'm like,
no, please. This will help inform all of your motorcycle opinions later. Don't worry.
Yeah. People are going to be like, I thought I came here for motorcycle content, and now I'm hearing this donut guy talk about stem cells. But I was working in this stem cell lab, and we were helping kids with genetic diseases, and I always like to say, well, I'm glad I stopped doing that because I get to bring smiles to the faces of millions of YouTube watchers, which is like the same thing,
Oh, right, exactly.
Like the level of like help I give the world is pretty much equaled out, I think.
Exactly.
It's funny. So I actually moved to when I left college, I moved to Los Angeles to be a high school teacher, and I taught inner city at-risk youth. And I often say the same thing. I'm like, now I'm just educating people about motorcycles, and it's just as valuable as the work that I used to do. Yeah.
Listen, it's just as good, guys. That's what I tell my mom. She doesn't buy a lick of it, but that's all right. Whatever.
That's great.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
so as we jump into this, the one question that I do have before, because I want to get this out of the way, watching your videos, it seems like a lot of people, go by Jerry. Do you prefer the more formal Jeremiah, or would you like us to go with Jerry for this?
I like
Podcast?
Jeremiah. Jerry is a character I played based off of an ad we did. Funny enough, which is weird because I did a lot of sketch beforehand. People would be like, "Hey, we have a character who wants to dress up in a costume and do it," and I'd be like, "Oh, yes, me, please. I would love to do that." And so we created a character called Uncle Jerry, which was a guy who was balding, and and so from that turned into this Uncle Jerry thing, who I now am known by. But yeah, Jeremiah is good. I prefer that. Another thing my mother hates. Hey, Mom, remember when you said you hated people calling me Jerry? Well, that's the genesis of that. I don't think she knows that. But yeah.
All right, so Jerry, it is then.
I feel like the chances of your mom listening to Highside, Lowside are fairly low. That's just a hunch.
She doesn't watch my own videos on YouTube,
right, exactly.
So there's no way she's listening to this. So I guess it's just not going to happen.
So she can be a whipping post for all you care. Okie doke. Well, so as we've told you, but a quick reminder for the audience, the way that these season finales of Highside, Lowside work is we get someone better looking and more charismatic than we are to come talk about the previous episodes of the season. So we'll sort of run through all the stuff. If you're a Highside, Lowside fan, you've listened to all of season 6, you're going to recognize some of this stuff. The furthest throwback is episode 1, which we did with our friend Patrick Garvin. And the topic was how many bikes in the garage is too many. So first things first, I guess, Jeremiah, do you have an answer to that offhand?
How many bikes?
How many bikes do you have in your garage right now? How many bikes do you currently own?
I think I have 9 right now, 9 or 10.
Wow. You're rivaling Patrick Garvin already.
Yeah, that's a lot. So is that too many or not enough as far as you're concerned, or just right?
I think 9 or 10 is just about right, without making it seem like I'm aware of my problem, of hoarding motorcycles, not wanting to admit to my girlfriend that it is too many, even though I know it is. Yeah, it's probably too many. I would say 4 or 5 is probably good. If you could get 1 in each discipline, then you're probably doing okay.
Yeah. So that's the follow-up question is like, do you have a vision? So you say 4 or 5. Do you have a vision for what that garage looks like? Are you like, I'm doing one of these and one of these? What talk us through that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. So you got your track bike, road track bike. You got your dirt bike.
Okay.
You got I would do like some sort of commuter bike or like a hooligan bike. There's 3, and then I'd have a backup dirt bike because dirt bikes break, and then I'd have like the cherry bike, the one that you like you bring out when you want to like flex on all your friends. You know?
So holding your
okay.
feet to the fire. Are there any specific models for each of those categories that if money was no object and you could put a track bike in the garage, a dirt bike in the garage, a hooligan bike, what would your picks be?
For each one of those? Okay,
Yeah.
so for the hooligan, I'd probably get a Aprilia 210.
Great choice.
I'd get for a track bike, probably either an R6 or I have an R7 track bike, but I know eventually I'm going to have to get rid of that and get something that's like a legit track bike. You know what I'm saying? So probably an R6, but they don't. You know, I guess you could still get a newish one in that. Dirt bike. I'm a Yamaha guy, by the way, so a lot of these are going to be Yamahas, but some sort
fair
of.
enough.
I'm a 250. I'm a big 250F guy. I'm not a big 450 guy. I get too wore out by those bikes. I'm not fast enough and strong enough to be able to ride them. So 250, some sort of 250F.
And would your backup dirt bike also be a
backup
250?
dirt bike, YZ125, which I stated before. Okay, gotta have a two-stroke, or else you can't be considered a true motorcycle enthusiast.
Sure.
And then what was my other? Oh, the stunt bike. Yeah. Okay, so.
Or your cherry bike, right? Like your one that you take out.
bike.
Like if you're going to Cars and Coffee and you want people to be like, "Oh, damn, Jeremiah's here."
Yeah, maybe like a Desmo Sedici or something like that.
Whoa.
Ooh.
That's a spicy garage. And I feel like you know, you're sort of like whatever it was, your commuter bike was a Tuono, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And then from there you're going to have a track bike and you're going to have something you want to flex on people with, and like Tuono arguably do all that, you know?
Yeah. It could. The Tuono hits all three of those, which is a great choice because it then can get interchanged into any of those other categories if you wanted to. If that bike happens to break down, or you get it.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to talk you into fewer motorcycles. I'll be the last person to do that, so don't worry about it.
So one of the things we had actually asked Patrick, and I'm actually really interested in this only because I wasn't expecting nine motorcycles in your garage. It's an amazing number. I think that's more than Zach and I have combined if we added our forces together.
I think so.
Can you name all 9? Like off the top of your head, can you rattle them off?
Oh yeah, for sure. Do you want me to do that?
That's the follow-up. Yeah.
Yes, I can. So I have a YZ250F. I have a YZ125. I have an RM250. I have a CRF 450R, which I converted to Supermoto. I have a Ducati 999. I have an R7. I have a Aprilia Mille. I have a what else do I have? I have a Buell 1125R.
Why?
Is that
Why?
8? Is that 8? I don't know if that's 8 or 9.
It was 4 dirt bikes, and then you said R7 999 RSV Mille.
RSV Mille 1125R. Oh my God, I'm forgetting one.
The one at your parent's house? Did you get that
I
one?
guess you could consider my TTR 125. Yes.
Okay.
So that's 9. I don't have it in my garage, but there you go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's an interesting kind of like, it's a pretty binary garage there. You got like hardcore sport bikes and you got hardcore dirt bikes, and you don't have a lot in the middle.
Yeah. 1125R, hardcore sport bike.
Well, fair enough. That's maybe that's what Eric Buell had in mind, but maybe not how it came out.
I have I think those are it really gives an insight into what I'm interested in. I don't have dual sports. I don't have other things that, I'm just like, hey, it's a single discipline bike. That's what I'm going to use it for.
Right.
That's it.
Jeremiah, no compromises, Burton.
That's right.
Understood.
That's right.
Well, it's interesting for all the Ducati fans that are listening. The 999 was always such a controversial motorcycle from an aesthetic standpoint, and that's one that is, maybe it was just the era that I was growing up in, but I always loved the looks of the 999. So it's interesting to me that out of all the Ducatis, you actually have that's the one that you have in your garage right now.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was at a Publix, which is a grocery store we have in the South, and there was a 999 on some sort of, I can't remember the magazine name, but it was on a magazine, and I was like, oh, that bike is sick. I want to have that bike. And this was before I even had a dirt bike, or maybe I just gotten a dirt bike, but I loved it. I always loved it. I didn't know about the previous gen Ducatis, so I didn't have any, I had no way to compare what I was looking at. I just saw it and fell in love with it. So I knew at one point in my life, I was going to be able to. That was going to be a bike I had.
That's why you were going to be a doctor, and we see how that worked out.
Yeah.
That's actually a really interesting nuance, though, to the whole 999 controversy of people thinking that it wasn't a very good looking bike, is everyone always compared it to the 916, the 996, the 998. But you didn't really have that, right? You just saw the 999 and you were like, that's it, man. That's the pinnacle. So I guess my question now is, presumably at this point, you're familiar with the 916 generation of Ducatis and 996 and 998, which all essentially look the same. Do you sort of, have you reverted at all? Are you like, oh, actually the 916 is a better looking bike than the 999? Or are you just like a 999 purist and you just like that was your first love and so you have a soft spot for it?
No, I think you can look at the previous gens and be like, those are better looking. I think like it's like you can, as much as I loved it as a kid, when I saw that I was like, oh, that looks better. Okay. But it didn't matter to me. I always, it was one of the first Ducatis I fell in love with, so I wasn't gonna shy away from it. But I think they can all be good. They can all look cool. Why do we got to compare? Wow.
Fair enough. Speaking of comparing, we are going to use this as the perfect segue into what episode 2 was about. And episode 2 was about beater bikes, where we actually had one of our listeners had written in, and he had bought a bike, and his dad was critiquing him for taking this bike out and riding it, because it was apparently this really cherry, vintage bike, and his dad was like, you should save that and preserve it. Don't go out and ride. So we played a game with Ari Henning called Ride, Die, or Save, which is kind of like our variation of Marry Kill, which is a popular game to play when you're drinking in college with your friends around. So I'm gonna flip the script on this a little bit, and I'm gonna give you 3 examples, and you have to figure out: do you ride? Do you kill one of these, or do you save? So which one are you going to ride? Which one are you going to preserve? And which one are you going to throw off of a cliff?
Okay, cool.
First is a Honda CBR 1000RR.
Okay.
Then you have a Suzuki SV650.
Okay.
And then you have a BMW R1250 GS adventure bike.
Okay, super easy. Don't even need to think about this. Okay,
man.
I'm going to ride or have consensual sex with, if we're playing it with the other rules, the CBR 1000RR.
Okay.
I can't live with that bike. It's too much for me. I'm only a mere mortal. I wouldn't be able to handle it, but it'd be fun for a ride,
Okay.
So riding that, I'm saving the SV650. Okay, do it all kind of bike, real fun. It gets a lot of flack, but you know what? It's hardy. It's a hardy bike. It's never gonna let you down. Okay, and then I guess I got to kill the GS. I got no use for that. Sorry, not my thing.
Wow, man, a dagger right through Spurgeon's heart. You're gonna chuck the adventure bike off a cliff. I love it,
man.
Yeah,
my heart. You're the GS fanboy. I mean, if it was a KTM he was thrown off of a cliff, I'd have to end this conversation right now. But yeah.
So it's good. It's a good response. Good answer. I don't think you can really find a lot of fault in what you have to say. The SV650. I'm surprised. I think there's a lot of people that'd be surprised that you went with the sort of plain Jane SV650 as your keeper. Yeah. But I love it. I've actually been riding around on an SV650 the last few days, and it's a peach. So just one more quick one, because you're a sport bike guy. I want to put maybe a different ride, die, and save to you right now.
Sure. Okay.
Based on your collection of motorcycles.
Okay.
You got GSX-R 600, R6, and CBR 600 RR.
Okay. So my first bike ever when I turned 18 was a GSX-R 600.
Okay.
A 2004, I think, yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's got a special place in my heart. R6, great, maybe one of the best motorcycles of our time if we're talking sport bikes. Honda, never really had one. dude, I forgot. I have an RC51. How could I forget about that?
Oh,
How does that slip your mind?
I'm so sorry. This is interrupting your game, Zach. I apologize, but that was the ninth bike. Was the RC51.
Okay, all right.
Oh my god.
For those of you listening that aren't familiar, the RC51 was a big V-twin sport bike that Honda produced. It was like the more aggressive version of the Superhawk 999.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the superbike. It was the flagship, faux Ducati of the era.
And I forgot
superbike
about
champion RC51. Wow, I can't believe that just slipped your mind. How about that?
I'm so sorry. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to let's see. I'm gonna keep the R6. That's gonna be my boo. All right. I'm going to. I guess I'm going to ride the GSX, the 600 GSX-R 600, and I guess I gotta get rid of the Honda CBR 600.
Okay.
A lot of Honda people, I'm sure, are very mad at me. I'm just upset.
No, you've already got the RC51 in the garage, so you're okay.
Yeah.
So wrapping up this episode, and it's interesting because I think even when we did this with Aries, Zach and I, we had some varying opinions on how we would tackle this ourselves. What is your core fundamental belief around like preservation versus riding? Like if somebody came to you with a really rare, vintage sport bike or maybe just a really rare production model, are you someone that kind of gravitates towards like, let's put it in the living room on a pedestal and look at it like a work of art? Or are you more of like, listen, this was designed to ride, let's get on this thing and tear it up?
Yeah, I mean, as a engineering student, I wouldn't call myself an engineer, but as an engineering student, it takes so much effort and energy to make anything that I feel it's a disservice if you don't use it the way it was intended to be used. And that goes for anything. Like, I don't care if it's old, if it runs, I feel like you should be able to go out there and ride it and, use it how it was made to be used. That, and in a sense, I think that's probably better for the bike than letting it just sit there and kind of be an art piece, because then it definitely deteriorates and rots away. And it will eventually, no matter what. But if you ride it, it will, keep everything all greased and lubed up and whatever. And yeah, so I'm of the camp that you get it, you ride it, doesn't matter what it is. But I also respect people. I mean, I think it's nice that people keep them in museums and stuff for, the normal plebes like us to go and see it and look at it and be like, oh, and amazed for, bikes that we'd never be able to ride or touch because we can't afford them. But that's good and all, but not my philosophy.
Yeah, fair enough. I like that. That sort of falls in line with the way that we all found ourselves feeling, that if it was built to ride, we should ride it,
I just like that you have the engineering background to back it up. You're like, listen, I'm an engineering student, so I'm telling you, you should go out and ride your motorcycle and keep it lubed.
Yeah,
I would just be pissed. Like, imagine you spending so I used to do 3D design for it was an aerospace company, but like you spend hours in front of a computer, like doing finite elemental analysis and, 3D design and all these things that you're like, hey, I want this thing to work and I want people to use it. I didn't spend all this hard work and effort to have you just put it in your living room. But I mean, okay, I guess, cool. But I would prefer if you just ripped on it.
It reminds me a little bit of the, did you ever see that Red Bull video they did years ago with the bolt, where they follow the singular bolt through the whole process of measuring it and being built in CAD, and then they make it and then they test it and then it ends up in a bag and then it ends up on a Formula One car, I think on a Red Bull Formula One car or something like that. And I think the whole idea, right, was that like each one of these little tiny pieces is important and somebody works on it and it takes a lot of energy to do. So, well, moving right along. Episode number 3 was basically we placed a big old target on the back of our friends at Suzuki Motor Corporation and called them out for not doing anything interesting in the world of motorcycling in the past 10 or 15 years. So 20. You're welcome to weigh in on that. Yeah, since that episode went live, actually, Suzuki's come out with some new models, a new engine, which is exciting and also calling our bluff to a certain extent.
Well, we like to think that we influence them. We like to think that they listen to the podcast and are like, well, let's just put some new engines out there.
All the engineers in Hamamatsu were like, well, if Zack and Spurg are making fun of us, we better get our act together. So you're welcome to weigh in on that if you have specific feelings. But I think the question that I wanted to put to you was, is there a brand in the automotive world that you feel like is totally resting on their laurels, whether it's a performance brand that hasn't done anything interesting, or a car company that really sort of is known for engineering that is not doing anything interesting, or you feel like they're stagnating and you see sort of like a dim future for it?
Well, I think there's probably plenty of examples of ones that people focus on where they're like, oh, they're preserving it. Porsche is one of them. So not to answer your question directly, but they're on the good side, I think, of making performance cars. And then I think like a lot of the major manufacturers, especially in the US, Ford being one of them, they just came out, I think, with their 2024 what's to come down the pipeline and the things that they've cut. Chevy, for example, they're getting rid of the Camaro. Like there's a lot of this move towards EV, which obviously I think is just a product of regulation, as well as car companies needing to like get ahead of this and figure out how to develop new models, and so they got to cancel some other ones. So I think from like an engineering standpoint, it looks like they're not doing anything because they're getting rid of a lot of cars that I think people enjoy and love, and but they're working, I'm sure, extremely hard in the background trying to make some sort of EV model that is going to potentially get people to change and kind of appreciate that form of transportation. So I don't know if I could call out one specifically, but I do know that some of I would say some of the main guys here in the States are definitely getting rid of some classics, which isn't great.
Right. Especially for optics, it sounds like. From the enthusiast side, people could be like, "Oh, how come that stuff's going away?"
Well, I think it's interesting because, like, from an enthusiast standpoint, I can get that, but that speaks to the evolution of like they're not afraid. They're changing because change needs to happen, and they are. I was talking about this with someone that worked as a designer for Urban Outfitters, I believe it was, and we had some questions with them earlier in my career here about like we were talking about motorcycle gear, they were talking about like clothing, and we were like, well, how do you know what the trend is going to be? And they were like, well, we set the trend. Like we tell people what outfit they're going to wear this spring. And so I think very similarly with that, like, you look at the auto manufacturing world and it's like, well, we're telling people almost like, this is what's going to be important to you. And like, we're designing this and hopefully it catches on and it moves forward. But it's like, they're setting the trend. The question that I have for you specifically, and I'm saying this as someone that dabbles in my interest in cars. I was on Porsche's website the other day, and it just so happens I don't go there because I can afford anything. I go there to leave subtle hints to my fiance as to like if we could ever get to this point, like, and she wants to buy me a present.
Your upcoming midlife crisis.
Yeah. But it seems to me like, and I wanted to just clarify because you kind of glanced over it. When you mentioned Porsche, is that a company that you see as kind of resting on their laurels, or a company that's being a bit innovative? Because when I look through their website, it seems like, not that they're doing the same old, but it seems like the same iterations of like lines that have come before it versus like, ground up redesigns like you might see with, Ford or some of these other manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, I think their philosophy is very different in how they go about creating new cars and new models. So like Porsche, they have, they're a flat six. That's their engine, right? And each year they just make that thing better and better and better and better. And it's just BMW, same way with like, you look at their M3, for example. That's just a car that they tweak each year to get better along the way. It's nothing major, aesthetics aside. I think, from an engineering standpoint, they play with engines, I think, BMW more than Porsche, but Porsche is a great example of taking something that is defined. I think that defines their brand a lot, right? Is the engine. So I could see how it's resting on their laurels, but it's so good. The car, and specifically I'm talking about the Carrera is the 911 is such a good car. It's so much fun to drive. It's just an amazing car. So why stray away from what you know works in that platform? Now they're doing other things with EVs. So we've had some of their EVs come over to the office and been able to drive them. Fantastic cars, so fast it's scary, like so they understand that, hey, we have to adapt, or otherwise we're going to be extinct, because we can't, from a regulation standpoint, in 30 years, if you can't get gasoline or whatever, which is why they're working on their own proprietary fuel. I can't remember the name of it, but Porsche has some fuel that they're developing to, in a sense, save their the core of their brand, which is this flat six, 911. So, I think that while on the surface it might look like they're resting on their laurels, they're far from doing that. I think they're probably one of the best big brand engineering companies or car companies.
It's funny. I mean, that's all super interesting to me. But the reason that I keep going back to the website every few months just to check in is to see the 911 line. So it's like, I mean, so part of the reason that you go back to this brand is because of what they're known for. And the offshoot of that is like, we're getting way off topic here, but that's what I love about the podcast. What's the SUV that Porsche has?
The Cayenne?
Yeah, because we were doing a dirt bike event, and dude rolls up with big wheels and monster tires, and like it just looked so cool. So I think it's like that's another avenue I could go down for cars that I can't afford. But I'll leave
the
it there.
adventure bike of Porsches. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That would suit you, I think. Well, to move along, to put something else in front of Jeremiah here, episode number 4 was entitled Worst Moto Purchases. That was with our friend Andy Greaser. And the pretty obvious question that we'd like to put to you, Jeremiah, is do you have a standout purchase in your motorcycling history that you think like you either regret, or you think when everyone else looks at my garage, they think, yeah, that's the dud of the batch. I shouldn't have bought that bike. Doesn't have to be one you own now. It can be one you purchased at any point.
One that you got rid of because it was that much of a dud.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got 2 that come to mind. One was a 2004 CRF 450R, and the reason that bike was a great bike, but for a kid who at the time had no mechanical abilities and didn't know how to shim valves, was a pain in the ass to start. They just chewed up valves, and so it was. Every time I went to ride that thing, I hated it because I was like, oh, if I fall or stall or do anything, I got to start this son of a. And it's a pain in the. So that was and they're known for being, for not being great. Those gins, they got really good a couple years later, the 06, 07, 08, which is why I have one of those, and bulletproof. Let's see. So that bike wasn't great. Really tested me as a youth on wanting to ride. And then probably currently, like I mentioned before, I do have this Buell 1125R. I love V-twins, and I, for whatever reason, I love this Lobster bike. This American-made sport bike that looks really goofy, and I got it for pennies on the dollar, so I can't be too mad. But whenever I tell I tell people who don't know motorcycles that I have this bike. I don't tell people who know about motorcycles I have this bike. Yeah, if you're embarrassed by it, it's probably a good thing for you to be like, yeah, I probably should have bought it. But it's fun. It's fun. I took it up to Newcomb's, I don't know, a couple months ago, and ripped around the crest, and I stopped for a bit, and I was like, what is that noise? Like something was like creaking, and I was like, what is going on? And I opened up the gas cap, and the fuel was boiling like I've never seen fuel boil before in my life. Just
so the fuel cap
everywhere.
Was just whistling because it was
just
under
whistling.
pressure.
Yeah, because of all the pressure. So once it was so weird because I went to, usually like when you twist a key, it vents a little bit and then you can open it. It would not stop venting. I was like, why is it still coming out? Why is it still?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so. Yeah, I mean, when you put the fuel in the frame right next to a very hot engine, it's going to get hot. So
right. When you put the fuel inside the frame, which is bolted to the engine because the engine has to be bolted to the frame.
Yeah.
Then you get some heat transfer and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great barometer.
Was the 1125? That was the last one that they did with their partnership with Harley Davidson before
Correct.
Harley cut them loose, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I think after that was the 1190, which was, it was called an EBR,
Yeah,
1190
technically an EBR,
RX or an SX. So it was, Harley had not to my knowledge, had no development with that bike. It was Buell himself.
So for those of you, I would say for those of you listening, if you're not familiar, you should Google the 1125 Buell just so you know what we're talking about. Because I'm assuming yours has like the big goofy fairing thing on the front.
It's a 2008 all black. It has the like blue anodized frame. It's very goofy looking. It's got I call it the lobster because it's got these like lobster claw radiator shrouds. It's so goofy. It's so weird and wild looking. And I think that's kind of why, going back, not to put any shame on the 999, I just like, weird looking bikes. There's something about it that's just, you don't see them very often. They're super unique. I can tell, I've never seen another 1125 hard here in Los Angeles. So, you want the unique factor. Now, it could be because they don't work, but also, I don't know.
Well, I think that's a great barometer of how proud you are of your motorcycle purchase. If you will tell someone who doesn't know about motorcycles, oh yeah, I got this cool bike, blah, 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 blah. But if anyone knows about bikes, you're like, yeah, I'm just not going to mention that because it's probably going to it's going to take a bad turn if I tell them that I have that bike.
I can't. I forgot I'm on a motorcycle podcast. So I've just outed myself to a bunch of people who are now don't respect me. If you didn't respect me before, you sure don't respect me now.
You have to understand.
Esoteric bikes always deserve respect, man. That's my opinion.
Our audience has to deal with Zach and I as their hosts. Or our audience is very forgiving of a lot of things. So
Okay,
I think you're going to be okay.
Thank you guys. Thank you for not sending me off to the gulag because of my purchase.
So episode 5 was an episode that we did with Patrick Garvin again. And this was titled What Is and What Is Not a Dual Sport. And really what we were trying to figure out in this episode, and this actually came from a Common Tread article that we wrote because there was a lot of debate about the definition of what a dual sport is. And when you look at Motorcycle Industry Council data, oftentimes adventure bikes get classified in as being dual purpose or dual sports because they're designed to go, on or off road. And that's where this whole discussion came from. So in your humble opinion, what is or what is not a dual sport motorcycle by your idea of the definition?
I mean, this is going to be an interesting one for him to answer because
he already killed the GS. He's like, I'm out.
But also, dude doesn't have any bikes with lights, any dirt bikes with lights in his garage anyway. It's all MX all day.
Yeah. Okay, so a dual sport, okay. To me, a dual sport is a bike that does two things worse than it would do if it focused on doing one thing. So, that's my definition of it. It's like, hey, you want a bike that can kind of go off road, but be kind of lame on the street? We got the bike for you.
I'm laughing because I'm crying a little. I'm crying a little inside.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm beating you up, and I'm really not trying.
I'm not taking it personally.
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's like, and I guess to me, dual sport is a DRZ 400, right? I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, is the
pinnacle of a dual sport to me, at least from a Florida boy perspective. Okay, because a lot of guys, and I wouldn't say I'm a motocross snob, but if your boy was like, "Hey, you want to go to the track?" I'd be like, "Yeah." Like, I didn't know you had a bike. Yeah, I have a DRZ. You'd be like, "Oh, okay, you don't have a motorcycle," which is not to like on them, but I just think it just. And to be honest, there are plenty of guys out there who could probably ride a DRZ on a motocross track way better than I can ride my motocross bike. So, don't listen to anything I say. I guess that's my opinion of it, is that it probably doesn't do it as well as if it would just solely focus on doing one thing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's if you're not into dual sport riding, you know, like riding trails or whatever, that kind of thing, and you're not, you haven't, you know, had any of the adventure bike Kool-Aid, I can totally understand your outlook being sort of like, look, it's the worst of both worlds. Like that's what you get. You get something that you kind of don't want every time you go riding, no matter what surface you're on, which is kind of an interesting take. I mean, I don't subscribe to that, and I know Spurgeon doesn't either, but
I'm just trying to figure out, like, if I hadn't seen so many of your videos where you absolutely just like trashed the bike that you were riding, I would offer you, I'm like, come out to Philadelphia, I'll take you to New Jersey, I'll give you my 890 rally, and I will convert you. But then again, I'm like, well, I want to preserve that bike. I don't want to kill it. And I just don't know if I can trust you to not want to, off it by the time you're done with it. So, but I do think it depends on where you grow up, right? Like where I grew up, we didn't have, a motocross track that was close. If you wanted to ride off road, you had to have a license plate. So as
really?
I got into riding
wild.
off road, like unless you went to, if you were, because most of the land here is private. If there's forests where you're going to ride, you have to have a license plate on the bike for Pennsylvania, New Jersey area. So the only way to really go off road without paying money to go to a track was you had a bike that had a license plate. So that's a dual sport or an adventure bike as the adventure bike thing came around. So I think it's a lot of the perspective of where you came up and how you got introduced to this kind of thing. Because my parents weren't supportive. Your dad, gave you a motorcycle and kind of fostered that. And my dad was just like, no, you can't do that. So I had to find ways around that. So, without having a pickup truck or other things to carry a motorcycle around in, you're like, okay, well, I can get this bike and then I can drive to the place where I'm going to ride off road, and I can ride off road and have that experience and then, come back. But I definitely can understand where you're coming from as far as like you're focusing on very specific weapons with the motorcycles that you own, and they're really good at doing certain things. So I can understand the compromise aspect of dual sporting.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who grew up in Florida, there are no rules in Florida, really. They're more like loose guidelines, which...
I was going to ask that, actually, like when you were riding your TTR 125 as a kid, and I don't want to like throw you under the bus, but was it technically legal what you were doing? Like were you going, or were you just sort of like riding where wherever you could go and hope you didn't get in trouble?
Oh, Zach, no, it was technically very illegal. Yes. It was, I used to ride... like on the side of the road, and hit those driveway jumps on the way to like a riding area, about 1.5 miles, 2 miles from my house. So I illegally got to the riding area because I didn't have a truck or a car or anything. I was underage, so I didn't have a license. Right. So I just rode my YZ125 or 250F to the riding area, and you didn't have to have stickers or anything like that. It was just a free for all. You could go wherever you want. That might have changed, nowadays. But I could see if you wanted to be a very good legal person, which I think most people should do, a dual sport would be great for that.
I think this is the genesis of the who needs a flippin' dual sport, right? Is you like. Yeah. I'll just ride a dirt bike down the side of the road.
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. So
exactly, I'm not paying no stinking registration fee like a sucker.
Yeah. This is you're talking to a backwoods hillbilly, pretty much. I don't look like one, but deep down in this core is just a redneck who can't read DMV laws or anything like that. So, nice. So if I was a more law-abiding citizen, I could see how dual sport would be great. And I haven't, they make some, I guess, like Honda has a more, I would say motocross-focused-esque dual sport as long with Husky, I'm sure, has one, KTM. So, I don't know. I'm sure they'd be a lot of fun because riding a dirt bike on a road is... Can I say that? Can I say it's really fun?
You can absolutely.
I know. I'm not a wheelie boy or anything, but riding a dirt bike on the street is really fun. But I don't want, maybe cut that out. I don't want.
Well, I think honestly, I mean, if you tried correct me if I'm wrong, Spurge, you're more knowledgeable about modern dirt bikes than I am, but I feel like if you tried a KTM 350 EXC
Yeah.
dual sport, you'd be like, this feels like a motocross bike.
Yeah,
Like,
my I have a KTM 350, and it's like they put a license plate on a dirt bike.
they're pretty
see.
extreme.
And honestly, I don't blame you. I don't blame you for your hillbilly ways. I had a friend when I was 16. I had a friend his dad got transferred to Gainesville, Florida, and I went to visit him 2 years later. So he moved there when he was 16 years old. I went to visit him when he was 18, and within 2 years he developed a Southern accent.
Yeah.
And we got down there and he's like, we're gonna go gator fishing, and I was like, I don't know what that is. He's like, we're gonna go fishing for alligators, and I was like, that sounds ridiculous. And he took me to some backwoods thing where they backed a pickup truck up to a lake and put a chicken on a chain and threw it into a body of water. And we're like trying to haul alligators out. I'm like, where am I? Like, so I can't hold you responsible. It sounds like it was an environmental thing for you.
Yeah. As someone who's also done that, I can't make excuses for my upbringing, but I can just say that I apologize if I've offended anyone with my dual sport comment.
No, not at all.
But on that note, I do think it's time that we get in a quick break from our sponsor, Motul, and then we will jump back in with Jeremiah with some questions from episode 6.
Okay, everybody, we're back. We've paid the bills, so to speak, and we can dive into the second half of our season in review here. One quick thing about your lack of need of a dual sport and your backwoods roots, Jeremiah. Are you the same way with cars? Like, are you sort of like, I want a sports car or I want a truck, and SUVs can pound sand. I don't want any of this halfway BS.
Not just a regular truck. It's going to have to be a lifted truck with like a great sound system and some lights on it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a 2001 Ford F-250 diesel. That is a very Florida truck.
But it's very convenient for Center City, Los Angeles. I mean,
yes,
like,
I mean, it pushes cars out of the way. Like, you wouldn't believe. No, it's not
good for rush hour traffic and gator fishing.
Yeah, I use it to gator fish, which people don't know. There are gators in LA. You just got to find them. They're sewer gators. I have that to haul my bikes around and stuff, and then I have a track car. I have a Camaro, 4th gen Camaro that I only use on the track, and then I lost the light here. And then that's it.
Oh my God, you look horrendous now.
And then let me try to fix this. But
no worries.
I have an SUV that I do my driving around town in.
Oh, so. You do have an SUV. What kind of SUV do you have? Are you comfortable sharing what kind of SUV you have?
Yeah. I have a GX 470 that's lifted and on mud tires. So yes,
I rest my case. Yeah,
you can pull the Florida out. I can just totally leave Florida, but it's still inside me, and I can't.
Right. You can take the boy out of Florida, but you can't, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like your lifted Lexus with mud tires is not unlike the bike that you chucked off a cliff, the BMW R1250. That's basically a lifted Lexus with mud tires. Essentially, it's like a big, comfortable car, but you can rage it through a mud puddle here and there.
Yeah, I can see how you would think that.
This is like Zach lawyering you into wanting to like adventure bikes and dual sports.
I just think it's funny. That's all. Whatever. Yeah.
Here's the thing though. Like cars, to me, that car is purely transportation and looks. It's not. I don't really go off road. My whole mentality around cars is, hey, if a nuclear apocalypse happens, I want the best vehicle. So I have a diesel truck and I have a Lexus that has a 1,000,000-mile motor in it. And that's it. And that, forget the track car. That's for fun. I enjoyed you, but I got to get that out of LA.
I like the fact that you were talking about using the truck to get your dirt bikes around. And for anyone that's ever transported motorcycles, really the convenience you want is a lifted, tall pickup truck that you have to get your bikes in and out of. I mean, a Toyota Tacoma 2-wheel drive that you can just walk it onto. You don't want that. You want something short, bigger and taller. Yeah.
Yes, you want. I'm 6'4" though, so I practice my stretching. So I have a whole setup. Yep, where I can lift my entire leg on from the ground to the tailgate, stretch that out so I can step up as I push a bike. Yeah, I constantly think about that when I get older. What am I going to do? And I guess I'll have to get a shorter truck. But you know what? Not yet, baby.
You could do what my dad did. He got one of those. It's like a step that you put into your trailer hitch because he can't get into his F-150 now because he's getting older. So he has like a little step that he puts on there, and then he just like walks up.
See, engineers, they're helping us out.
That's right. All right. So that's enough distracting with the last question, blah, blah. The next thing we want to ask about was we did episode number 6 was with our colleague Jen, and it was entitled First Track Day, What's Stopping You? Sounds like you've been to a track day or 3. And I guess, I don't know, unless Spurge, you got a better idea. I think the best question is how did that transition happen? Like you had a Gixxer when you were a teenager, and then at some point you were like, I need to go to a track. Was that sort of via track days in the automotive world, and you thought you wanted to do it on a bike, or like how did that transition happen? And
to be clear for our audience, if I'm correct, you had a Gixxer as you're like a commuter bike in college, right?
Yeah, I commuted to college in that bike. Yeah, and I always wanted. I mean, from the second I got that bike, I was like, I'm going to the track. I'm going to learn how to drag knee. And then I realized, track days are expensive. I was like, I don't have money for that. So as a poor college student, I couldn't afford it. So it wasn't until really then I moved out to LA and I realized, LA is expensive also. I'm making money for the first time, but LA takes it all, from housing and all that. And so I had a SMR, what is it, 610 or 550 or one of those Husqvarna's, the previous Husky before they got acquired by KTM.
Okay. When they were owned by BMW. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was it was a supermoto, I believe. So I commuted in that, and I was like, maybe I'll take this to the track, and then realized that it was still expensive. And then I bought an R1, a 1999 first gen R1, which I still have. And that is, that's my kind of, was my first track bike. And once I had a little bit of money, I was like, okay, well, let me finally go to a track day. So I went to Streets of Willow. They had, I don't know, I made it one session, and then the second session, I low-sided into the bowl over there, and that was fun.
This is on that R1?
That was on that R1, yeah.
Okay.
So my first track day ever, I just got 2. I was just feeling myself, and it was like the warm-up lap. It was so embarrassing. I was like, oh my God. And today it still messes me up because I still get nervous that I'm gonna low side when I go into particular corners.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's how it started. It was I always wanted to do it. Had to wait until I had some money till I could afford it, and then really shined when I got out there on the track, to say the least. I think I impressed a lot of people
Prodigy.
with my skills.
So people hear a lot of too much probably of our advice. Spurge, myself, our RevZilla co-hosts. But if you were talking to someone who's like thinking they want to do a track day, or they've been to one and they're trying to get into it and they're excited, do you have any sort of like words of wisdom off the top of your head? Like what would you tell someone like that? What can you tell them based on your experience that might help them move forward in a less crashy way?
Yeah, I wish I went out there. This was all by myself. I kind of was.
Okay.
I didn't have any friends out here to kind of help me. If you can get in a group of guys, because the motorcycling community, I think is, that's kind of why, going back to why I started into motorcycles, I really wanted to surf, being a Florida boy, and surfers were pretty mean to me when I was starting to learn. But for whatever reason, I had a buddy who was into motorcycles, and he was super kind. And then I met some of his friends who were super kind. So like the community was like really, really welcoming. So I wish when I came out here, I met more people, met more friends who did track days and stuff, and kind of went with some buddies and kind of learned, all it would have taken was someone to be like, hey, first couple laps, just go real easy. And someone may have told me that, I'm sure they did in the class, but it was just over my head, But if it's your buddy or if it's your friend, you kind of listen to them a little bit more. Where it's just like, take it easy, And I tried to go too hard. I didn't have anyone to kind of show me the ropes a little bit. So if you can find someone to show you the ropes, that's probably the best the best way. And then if not, hit me up. I'm always looking for friends.
Sounds like if you're in Los Angeles, Jeremiah still doesn't have any motorcycle friends, so he's open to that.
And I think it's important to note that while we're using I think sometimes we throw around the term guys, whether you're a boy or a girl or whatever. I think it's one of those ones where motorcycling has really been an inviting environment for a lot of people, and I think the track day community has been really accepting. So there are, through social media groups or other ways to connect with people like Jeremiah. You can reach out to some of these Facebook groups or Instagram groups and get to know different track organizations, and it's a way for you to kind of meet friends as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think they probably have some new beginner classes. I probably should have done that. I probably, instead of just going to a track day, done some sort of like intro beginner track day class where you get all sorts of different motorcycles, not just sport bikes, but you get all sorts of bikes kind of in there. And it's like, because it's a lot, and it's intimidating. You show up, it takes a lot of courage to be able to be like, hey, I'm going to sign up, I'm going to go, I'm going to be by myself, I'm going to figure it out. It takes some courage to do that. So, to just do that is a positive step, but take it easy. You want to be able to do.
If you could do it again, would you sign up for like a beginner track class, or would you do it exactly the same way that you did it and take your licks and learn from them?
Nah, I think it would have been better to do some sort of beginner track class, especially for someone who has a little bit of a motorcycle ego like myself. I was like, I've ridden dirt bikes. I've done 100-foot tabletops. I know what I'm doing. I've driven these on a car, but it's like, throw that all aside. It's a lot of it is just about, and I think like part of it is, there is this ego associated with it where it's just like, oh, there's a guy who's faster than me and I got to beat him in this mystery track day or like this thing that means nothing, but it's in my head and I got to be better. It's just like, if you can just put all that crap aside and just go out there and try to have fun and be better, if that's what you want to do, or just learn something. I probably should have taken a little bit slower, but I wanted to be Valentino. And I didn't pull it off.
It's funny because I know that we've told the story before, and I'm waiting to see if our producer Chase is actually cringing out of the corner of my eye, because one of my favorite stories of him was he had never ridden off-road before, and I took him out and I was like, do you want like some tips or something? He's like, I've ridden motorcycles before, I know what I'm doing. And we got to like the first corner and he just grabbed all the front brake, and like next thing I know, I look behind me, he's got a Honda 450L laying on top of him, and he's just like, I don't know what happened. And I'm like, no, you know what you're doing, you don't need any tips.
Be willing to accept advice. That's a great thing. And if you don't have an ego, then that makes it a little bit easier. But I'd do it over again for sure, because I still, like I said, once you kind of, it takes a mini time riding at a track, I think, or at least for me, to like get over those crashes, because then you get a little nervous, and then it's like you kind of lose a lot of progress unless you can mentally just get over it. And me, I'm the type of guy where it's like I got to do it a whole bunch. I have to. I can't. I'll never. Even when I ride motocross tracks that I've ridden hundreds, thousands of hours, first time out, I still like, I'm instantly rusty, even if it's been a couple months. So I'm just not that kind of, and there's certain guys that talk about like being envious, where they're just like, oh, I just get on this thing and I know it like it's, like my third arm that I never had. It's like, they're just super, can just ride no matter what,
Yeah. It's something that I've thought about too, because it's like, I struggle, I have a lot of friends, and this past year I started doing off-road racing. And I'm not good at it because I need even if I was riding the day before, I need my warm-ups in the morning. Like I want to go out and ride for a little bit and get my feet comfortable underneath me. And like when you're racing, it's like you don't have that. It's like green means go, and you got to be on. And it's where I struggle the most, because some people can go out in the first lap. They're just they're turning it on, and I definitely am with you in the fact that like, I need to warm up, especially if it's after a crash.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'd like to move on if that's okay with you, Spurg.
Yeah, let's go.
Copy that. So episode 7 was entitled "Biggest Motorcycle Controversies," and we don't want. It's easy for this to spin out because we're going to talk about some things that are,
Controversial.
They're hot button topics in the world of motorcycling. So I think maybe a sort of a lightning round in this case as well, and you can give us your sort of like gut instinct or opinion on it, Jeremiah. I'm curious what you have to say. So one of the arguably the hottest of all buttons in the motorcycle world are helmet laws. There are some places in the United States where you don't have to wear a helmet. There's some places where you do. And Spurge and I, when we dug into this, it was sort of interesting what our feelings were, and we ended up on different sides of the fence, I think, on whether or not there should be helmet laws. Now I know you're like you're a little bit of a hoodlum, right? So are you?
He's
like
a freedom-loving Floridian. My
right?
God.
That's what I meant. Yeah. So So where do you fall on helmet laws? Do you think they're? I mean, I know you're a person who wears a helmet typically.
Yeah.
But
Always.
But how do you feel about that topic?
Okay. So this is tricky to me.
Also,
because,
who did you vote for in the last election? Just kidding.
yeah, it kind of feels like this. It's like,
I know.
Politically,
It is. It's charged. It is.
Charged,
It's a tough thing to just dive into, but answer to whatever comfort level you have.
I will say this. I think people are stupid, right? And because of that, the government sometimes has to step in on certain things.
No, you're doing great. Yeah, I mean, way to walk right into that.
No, I think like, okay, I think you should be able to do whatever you want, man. If you don't want to wear a helmet, don't wear a helmet. That's on you. I also feel like if you don't want to wear a seatbelt, don't wear a seatbelt. But I think part of the problem comes into this, which is like the political part of it, I think, is like, well, who pays for you if something happens and you don't have insurance, right? That's the thing where it's just like, well, if you want to do that, accept that responsibility, but I'm not gonna pay for your medical bills. You wanted to look cool as hell, buddy. You looked cool as hell. But that doesn't mean when you spill it, I'm gonna pay for your medical bills. But yeah, I think you should be able to, rock no helmet. I would never do that. This is literally the only thing the reason I have a job is this dumb face. So if I could wear 2 helmets, I'd wear 2 helmets to just protect everything up here. But yeah, right. That's what I would say.
Well, yeah, good answer. I like it. So slightly less controversial, but a fun one, I think. Speaker systems on motorcycles. So certain touring bikes, like big BMWs, Harleys, stuff like that, they have sound systems, right, where you can like roll down the road and you can. Whatever, you can listen to NPR if you want to. You can listen to gangster rap. You can listen to country. Whatever your poison is,
The day I hear someone blast NPR on a motorcycle, I'm calling you up and be like, "Hey, it happened."
If you take enough rides with Ari Henning, you'll hear it eventually.
Wow.
We were coming back from somewhere one time on touring bikes, and it was super late and we were falling asleep, and I remember being next to him in traffic and I could hear like Terry Gross at volume level 11. He was like trying to stay awake, which is funny. Anyway, so do you have a strong feeling about that? Like, have you ever ridden a bike with a sound system? Did you like it? Did you think it was fun? Do you think it was stupid? Where do you fall there?
I have not. I've never ridden a bike that has a stereo, but I quite enjoy when I see bikes come through me here, and I live in South LA Inglewood area, so we got a lot of daggers with speaker systems, and I love it. It's just this I like when people are happy, and if it makes them happy, sure.
Nice. Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. What if their happiness infringes on your happiness? Like, what if
I feel like that's a me problem then. If I'm getting upset about some guy's music, well, then I got something deeper going on, and I'm like projecting and I'm putting it out on them. But someone enjoying themselves shouldn't make me upset. That's something going on at the house. I'm gonna
bring this back up next time Zach goes off on motorcycle speakers. I'm gonna be like, Zach, what's really going on?
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me who really hurt you.
I obviously have some reflecting to do. That's a hot take. I like it. Next one is motorcycles being considered another vehicle on the road and having to pay, motorcycle having to pay the same parking meter prices, the same toll on a bridge, the same entry fee to a national park, something like that. Have you experienced that at all? Like, do you ever get miffed when a parking garage is like, hey, why don't you pay the same amount as that Chevy Suburban? And you're like, come on, man.
Yeah. Never paid a parking garage fee on a motorcycle. Nice. Never will, ever in my life. I'll Florida man it and I'll drive around the gate. I do not care. A part of it is I'm freeing up traffic and I'm not giving as much emission or putting out as much toxic gas into the world. I'm whatever. No, dude, I risk my life, especially here in LA. If I'm riding around, I get free parking and I get no tolls and I get to ride in the HOV lane. That's just non-negotiable.
I like it.
I don't know. And by the way, I don't know which side you guys stand on these.
I know.
These
I think that's funny.
So I feel like I'm looking at your face to be like, am I okay? Or are they?
Well, it's interesting because we really, there were some of these where when we were doing the pre-production of this episode, I'm like, I got to go back and re-listen to this to see like what was my answer for this. I know Zach and I were a bit divided. I was more of, for helmet law, I was more of your side of things where I was like, I don't think there should be a law. If people are going to be dumb enough to go out and do it, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Zach was a little bit more like, no, we need to protect people from themselves. I think with speakers, we were a bit flip-flopped. Zach was like, no speakers. And I was like, but if I want to listen to Taylor Swift, and then there was a whole Taylor Swift conversation. I think we both agreed on like national parks and parking and tolls. Like I have two wheels, not four. I weigh, 1,500 to 2,500 pounds less. Let me just have my reduced rates. The one that Zach and I were both in alignment on, and I want to get your take on this. And it kind of falls into, you had mentioned Southern California, Los Angeles, HOV lanes. Lane splitting is a really hot button topic, and it's hot button within the motorcycling world. We've done some articles here because there's a lot of motorcyclists that are like, lane splitting is dangerous. I don't want to do it. It makes everybody look bad because outside of Southern California or outside of California in general, it's technically really not legal in the same way it is in California. So when you're in Philadelphia and there's a motorcyclist blasting down, in between two lanes, it creates this negative, imagery around motorcycling because they're technically breaking the law. Whereas if it was just legal everywhere, I think the world would be a better place for it. So where do you stand on lane splitting in general? Are you for lane splitting? Are you against lane splitting? How do you lane split?
Yeah, I do. And I'm for it. Again, it's one of those things. Like if I'm going to take the risk, I should be allowed to. If I'm going to take the, I guess, riskier form of transportation, there's got to be a benefit for that for me. I'm risking getting hit by a car. Let me split lanes so I can get to work 15 minutes faster. Isn't that crazy? You're like, yeah, I'm willing to die as long as I get to work 15 minutes faster.
But it's not even necessarily danger, right? Sometimes it's just like comfort. Like when it rains, a motorcyclist gets wet. Ipso facto at the red light, they go to the front of the line. Like that seems like pretty basic 100%. Logic to me.
Yeah. So for the last week where you guys have been having rain in Southern California and you have to experience what the rest of the country feels like every other day of the year, you're really been struggling.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it as I go to the front of the line and it's raining and I'm on the bike and I go up to the front and I puff my chest out a little bit. I'm like, this is part of what you get. I'm going to get home a little sooner because I'm getting rained on.
Yep. It's part of that's the trade-off. And I think like the other, I've watched plenty of videos online of, guys lane splitting in other parts of the country where it's illegal and motorists absolutely hate it. So if it was just, I don't know, legalize it everywhere and then people aren't so surprised by it. I will say this, we did a video recently on Donut about the Tango T600, which is the shortest car. It's like smushed this way. It's about as wide as I think a Harley Roadster or some Harley. And I was lane splitting in the car. And let me tell you, people did not like that at all. So even Californians who are used to motorcycles lane splitting were not happy about me using a car to lane split.
And they were like, oh, hell no.
Yeah, they were like, oh, hell no, which technically is legal I said, if you guys haven't watched that video, it's super funny.
Producer Chase was just pulling it up so I could see exactly what vehicle you were talking about. But no, I think it's interesting because like I actually wrote an op-ed piece for our print magazine around just that. Like if we were to make lane splitting legal in all 50 states, then drivers would have to come around, and it could actually create a lot more transparency for motorcycles in general, which would be a good. I want to round out that particular question with: do you find yourself riding your motorcycle more because you can lane split and get to work 15 minutes sooner? Like if lane splitting wasn't legal in Southern California, would you be jumping in the Lexus more for work, or would you still ride the motorcycle as much?
Yeah, 100%. So I live about 8 minutes from my office here in Inglewood. So I drive my car to work because the risk isn't worth the time savings of me getting to work. I get there so quick, it doesn't matter. So when I had to commute further away, when we had a different office on the other side of town, rode motorcycle every single day, got there quicker, got home sooner. So it's very dependent on if I didn't have, if lane splitting was illegal, I wouldn't commute in a bike. I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah, interesting. So, I one quick note: I noticed in one of your videos you mentioned that you park for free at the airport and you kind of get high on that.
I love that. Love that
LAX.
little hack.
So good,
which is so good. It's
so
epic.
good.
We've talked about that a bunch. So the last piece of this Moto Controversies episode was about tiered licensing. Now, you mentioned earlier, there's some bikes that you've had in your motorcycling career that you're like, yeah, probably a little bit too much for me at the time, that kind of thing. What do you think about that in general? Is that something you would, support, or like, do you think it's a good idea, or do you think are you back to Florida, freedom loving Florida boy? Like, nah, man, if I want to buy my R1.
For those of you listening to this as a podcast and not watching the video, Zach's doing like Samity Sam finger guns in the air every time he talks about Florida, which I think is just priceless.
Fun fact: Yosemite Sam is actually from Florida, not California. Just so you guys know. I completely made that up, but it doesn't seem right. Anyway, tiered licensing.
I didn't know that, and I was like, "Yeah, it makes sense."
Yeah.
I thought he was from Texas, but what do I know? Texas and Florida are like the same thing. I mean, here I think tiered licensing is probably good, but will never happen ever. It just won't happen. I don't ever see it being a thing that actually gets through legislation or anything like that. Maybe I'm wrong and it will, but I think it's probably a good idea. I mean, I don't think a 16-year-old, and I don't know what the law, to be honest, I'm pretty ignorant here. How old can you be to buy a motorcycle now?
16. You just have to have a license, I think.
Yeah.
As long as you go get a license, you can go out and get you a H2R.
Get yourself a Busa.
Or a Busa. Yeah. See, probably not the best idea.
Right,
I would never, if I had a son, I would be furious if he went out and bought a bike that could do 200 miles an hour. But
what if you had a daughter?
Yeah, or daughter. Yes, yeah. Actually, no, I take that back. She would be sick as heck on that thing. Yeah, no, I don't know. I wouldn't want. I don't think it should be a first bike. But I think like that's just like common sense. But it goes back to the helmet thing. People sometimes need, quote unquote, some guidance in some of this, and so you got to put rules in place, or else it's just ultimate chaos. And
some people don't have common sense, and you have to remind yourself of that.
Yeah. Hey, I work in the YouTube space. I see people's comments. I know what's going. I know the common sense level. Yeah, I know. So I don't know. It would be good because I imagine there's probably a pretty good percentage of under 18 or sub 21 deaths on motorcycles, and it could be because of the bike that they're on. So no one wants to have a person who's just getting into the sport or whatever you want to call it not be around. But I just don't see it ever being a thing.
Little sub bullet, only because you brought it up. I think we talked about this with Ryan Fortnite. Do you ever obviously we work for YouTube, right? So you let most of the just roll off your back. Do you ever get one of the comments where you're like, oh, that hurt. Like,
hurt.
you know, it just like they just stings.
Man. I'm a hardened LA comedian. I've had live audiences do that for me for a long time, where it just doing stand up in front of people that don't laugh at you at all. That'll really give you a thick skin. So there's no comment out there that someone has left where I'm just like, oh, come on, that hurts. No, never.
I like it.
Not yet, but that's not to say that I don't put the challenge out there to people. Right. Bring it on. Okay. Right. I want to cry at night.
There are people cracking their knuckles right now. They're like, wait to see what I have to say about you, boy.
Start typing right below.
Yeah.
So episode number 8 this year was titled Moto Navigation Maps to Apps. We had our friend Justin Bradshaw on, who founded the app Rever, as a colleague of ours here at the Komodo family of brands. And I guess our question to you is, when you do ride a motorcycle, whether it's around LA or on a long trip or something like that, do you have a preferred navigation type? Are you memorize it all, like put it all on your noodle and hope for the best, or do you have like phone mount on your handlebar, or is that too distracting? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I guess it depends on where I'm going. If I know where I'm going, I won't use a map. I'll just hit whatever side street or whatever, place I think is going to get me there the quickest, and because I can split lanes, I can ride on the sidewalk. That's legal too.
Okay. You can run over pedestrians, whatever. Who cares?
Okay, I've never done that. A lot. I've never done it a lot.
It's like the Grand Theft Auto of commuting across Los Angeles. Yeah,
I'm not being a very good representative of a car guy who also likes motorcycles. It's a dude who's pretty lawless. No. Yeah. So, but if I'm going to some place I just have a mount that just runs Google Maps. Yeah. I didn't know there were other options out there. That shows my ignorance on the matter. But yeah.
Well, so it sounds like most of the time, for your riding, you're riding as a commuter, or you're going to do a track day, either on or off road. And maybe this is whether it's on a motorcycle or a car. Have you ever done like a long road trip? Like, have you ever hopped on a motorcycle and said, you know what, I'll see you later, honey. I'm gone for the next 4 days.
No, never. I've never done. I actually looked at or was it Henning's Instagram, where he had some bike, I can't remember, with a tent next to it, and I was like, oh, that looks fun. I'd love to camp and
moto camping,
moto camping, but I've never done it. I've never had the bike to do it. So
maybe
I shouldn't have killed
the
off.
GS. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly.
Yes, I shouldn't have killed off that GS. Yes, I'm so sorry. No, I haven't.
Well, you still have the
it.
SV650, so you can kind of throw some bags on that and go.
Yeah, put some bags on there and go to Big Sur. Who knows? But no, I've never had. I mean, with a car, yeah, I've done a bunch of road trips, but never on a bike.
Yeah,
okay,
fair enough. Okay,
and then follow up question with the car. Did you like plan out a route and like take an adventurous route, or did you just like find the highway and drive from Florida to Los Angeles and call it a road trip?
Now, usually I have certain like key points I want to hit, or roads I want to hit, or whatever it is, and then just map it out that way and just know I'm going from scenic point to scenic point.
Okay. Word. Connect the POIs. This guy knows his maps, people. I think we can.
You guys did a whole episode on that? Wow. How many people didn't listen to that?
Yeah. Actually, we had a map expert on, so he sort of like talked to us about riding around the world using paper maps or using electronics or whatever. So, but I can understand, especially the guy with the motocross bikes and sport bikes in his garage. I can see you being like, dude, I don't care about maps.
It's interesting though, because like you are someone that, you mentioned Newcomb's Ranch earlier, which for those of you listening that didn't know what it was 30 minutes ago, and we never explained it for you. Newcomb's Ranch is like this restaurant up in the hills north of Los Angeles, and it's on Angeles Crest Highway, which is Highway 2, beautiful motorcycle car road. And it's usually like the stopping turnaround point for people to grab lunch and then come back down. But I think it'll be interesting. We should hook you up with a version of the Rever app, because one of the things that we talked about that's in there is you can pull up these things called Butler maps, which it highlights. You can turn on, one of the features is like find the curvy roads, and you can use it to plan out a road trip where you're like, I only want to go on roads like Angeles Crest Highway, and it like links them all together for you. So from like a I'm going to plan a wicked weekend ride kind of a thing. That's kind of where we navigated with some of the conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've usually most of the roads, the crest is something I like Googled years and years ago. It was like, oh, you go up there and then you kind of find offshoots of it and kind of just explore. I'm a big, even I off-road a bunch over like Mount Pinos area, and there's all sorts of, fire trails and stuff like that. If I'm on a main road and I see a dirt road, I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to go down it. I hope I don't get in trouble.
Have you ever had an example where it went awry? Like where like you were like, oh, I'm just going to go down this dirt road, and then chaos ensued?
Never. No.
Wow.
Knock on wood.
He's an MX guy. He's not going to be intimidated by a dirt road,
Yeah, he's got that Lexus.
Yeah.
He hits that dirt road, just goes right through it.
I put legit bead locks on this Lexus, so I air down.
Nice.
And nothing can get in my way.
Nice. Very nice. So episode 9 we did with our friend Ari Henning, talking about the motor industry's biggest blunders. And this was the European edition, not to be confused with the American edition we did in the previous season. And I guess our question for you, Jeremiah, is, are there any bikes, and buckle up, because if you don't have any bike examples, we're just going to put you down the automotive road. But are there any bikes, especially ones from Europe, that you can remember looking at and being like, man, I don't know why they built that, aside from maybe the BMW GS, which you obviously hate? But are there any bikes that you think of as like a black mark on motorcycling, or every time you see one you think it's stupid or anything like that?
No, not that I know of. I can't think of anything. I'm sure. I'm trying to think of. Yeah, I kind of have a different perspective when it comes to anything that's made, even in the car world. I'm just like, oh, if they made it, I'm sure someone's enjoying it. That's kind of going back to like the music on a motorcycle thing.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Someone likes it. Like I'm happy for them. I don't know. I've never like.
You have a real live and let live philosophy in life, and I like that.
Yeah, I've never once seen a bike come out. I mean, and same thing with cars. There are plenty of cars where I look at and be like, oh, what are they doing? That's just not for me, And I speak, when I say those comments, they're from my perspective of like, oh, nice. I wouldn't pick that because the design philosophy or whatever it is isn't something that I mesh with, but that doesn't mean I want it to go away. So I can't think of off the top of my head a motorcycle that I was like, oh, what are they doing? Because I think any bike edition is probably pretty good. And that goes with like, I know, some of the electric motocross bikes, when they came out, people are like the Alta, people were like, what is this? Is a electric dirt bike, those suck. They don't have the sound. But then from that, you got so many, other companies that kind of have started to branch out and do that. And yeah, I don't know. I can't think of anything that I would be like, why did they do that?
What about from the automotive side? Is there an example that comes to mind from a European manufacturer that didn't speak to your personal design aesthetic, where you're like, I don't agree with that? I mean, obviously, if somebody else likes it, that's great. But is there anyone that comes to mind that, just didn't do it for you?
Yeah, the new 3 Series BMW is not my thing. From a looks perspective, I will say that.
First the GS and now the 3 Series. Yeah. My God,
he's anti-German.
I'm not anti-German.
I'm gonna go on the record.
I don't want, for all the German people listening, I love you guys. No, I don't know. I mean, I just the looks of that car just don't do it for me. It's a great car. I think it's fun to drive, but it's just not, aesthetics. But I would never think of, hey, why'd you guys make that?
Yeah, well, I think especially with something like a 3 Series, it's pretty clear why they made it, right? They made it for people who don't care and they just want a good car.
Well, what was out of curiosity? Is there something that you guys, or that's a common a collective motorcycle where everyone kind of is like, oh, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, there's some stuff that has been released in the motorcycling world that has never done very well from a sales perspective, and no one ever seems to like it really. And I guess there are a few bikes over the course of history that we talked about that they don't see success in any area really, right? They don't do well in any area. And I think that because of that, they sort of become famous for being bad, right? I mean, there have been cars like that too, right? It's like,
Sure.
you know, they made, I don't know, a Ford Pinto or something like
Ford
that. Sort of like
Pinto's a great
famously
one, yeah.
bad cars that everyone was like, oh, we just, and people bought them and used them and they went and got groceries in them. And it's not that they all exploded or anything. They just have this real
some
reputation.
Of them did, and that,
Yeah,
that tainted the reputation.
Exactly. So I mean, you know, to give you an example, you know, like Ducati made a cruiser in the 70s. Was the Indiana Spurge? Is that right? Ducati Indiana. So like that's something where, you know, you sort of have this feeling that not only did it not do all that well at the time, and people now think it's kind of ugly, but also you almost think you have this feeling that people that work at Ducati now are sort of like, if you bring it up, they're like, oh, geez, I don't really want to talk about that, you know? So I appreciate that your outlook on this whole is sort of like a very, like Spurge said, live and let live. Like when it comes to the Coke and Pepsi debate, you're like, well, I like this one, but if you like that one, that's cool, man. I don't care, whatever. It's all good. I think that's a good attitude to have in general. But I think that's, to answer your question, that's what we talked about, was stuff that was like sort of famously bad for one reason or another.
Yeah.
You know?
So like the overarching theme of like his cruiser example, Zach's cruiser example, is like we had talked about like doing American cruisers wrong, like manufacturers from Europe that tried to do a spin on an American V twin that really just kind of butchered it.
Gotcha.
If people are buying a Harley, they're going to buy a Harley, and all these manufacturers are trying to capitalize on this. The other one we talked about was like the collapse of the British motorcycle industry, and like Triumph in the late 70s and early 80s, you know, letting their manufacturing get so bad that like the bikes just were bad when you took them off the floor. And that carries over to the automotive world when you're thinking about like Lucas Electronics that were used, you know, by both automotive and motorcycle manufacturers in the 60s and 70s, and that still plagues people today that are restoring, you know, British vintage race cars or Triumph motorcycles.
So
Gotcha.
So before you ask us, Jeremiah, yes, we did a whole episode about that.
I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have made that joke. I
are you kidding me?
appreciate that you guys are in my live and let live mentality. I want to make sure I'm consistent, and I'm glad. You know, I guess my thought is just like I'm just happy that people are making, because my thing is, aside from that, I get now what you're talking about with like reliability issues and like people, you know, it's kind of like Harley with the what was it, the AMF years, you know, where
Exactly. That was season 5 where we talked about
That's right.
American motorcycle blunders. So we had to come back and be fair and do European ones this season.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I see where you're coming from. I'm just happy that people make motorcycles, because I don't know how to make one. I couldn't make it if I tried. So.
I love it. What a great outlook. When people's like, that bike sucks, you can be like, yeah, well,
Dude, make one better.
yeah,
I
you
can't
can
make one. Yeah.
Right on. Okay.
Well, I mean, you tried. You modified that Coleman mini bike.
Yeah.
Pretty darn well.
Hey, we did a fantastic job on that. It caught fire, but that wasn't my fault.
I think the best part. So if you're not familiar, what was the title of the episode? Was it like stuck a nitrous oxide on?
Yeah, we put nitrous on a Walmart motorcycle.
Yeah,
is the name of the video.
But my favorite part of that is when the bike catches on fire. I would have been running like a scared child, and you just stood there and were like hitting it, and like your coworkers were screaming at you to get away from the bike, and you just stood there and like you did not seem to run away in fear.
What's gonna happen? Is it gonna blow up? Well, whatever.
Maybe.
It's fine. I wanted to make sure the fire didn't get worse. I was trying to smother it. Luckily, we had a fire extinguisher. But you know what? As a little teaser, we have another episode that's coming out soon where I bought a turbo from a Suzuki Alto on Wish.com, and I may or may not have put that on that Coleman mini bike. So
we have a long debate on Highside, Lowside going back to like season 3 or season 4, where someone wrote in and said we don't have enough turbos on motorcycles, and Zach was like, I agree with this person, Turbo Bruce, I think his name was.
Correct.
And I was like, that's insane. You can have a 45 horsepower, you know, Z400 that will do 100 miles an hour, and it's light as nimble. Like, you don't need a turbo for that. Mm-hmm. Where do you fall on the debate? Are you pro turbos on motorcycles, or are you anti turbos on motorcycles?
I'm I'm very pro turbo on a motorcycle.
I knew what I was getting into as soon as I asked the question to like a God-fearing Floridian like yourself.
I mean, if you were to say, I mean, most, like, they have a F-150 now that is, or they have had for forever. That's an EcoBoost turbo V6, you know, that's
making more horsepower than the V8 was.
Right. So all it takes is one manufacturer to be like, hey, I'm going to make this better, and I'm going to open the floodgates to people improving this engine and this platform.
But that's on a truck where you can hide the weight. You can hide the weight on a truck that already weighs 2 tons. Like, if you have a motorcycle that weighs 350 pounds, it's a lot harder to hide a turbo system on that.
I don't want to hide it, if we're being honest. I want people to see it.
First of all, motorcycles don't weigh 350 pounds. Don't believe what your Uncle Spurgeon tells you. Also, how much does a turbo weigh?
I watch Daily Rider. There's plenty of motorcycles that are around the 400-pound mark, so give or take 50 pounds. I'm sorry.
Sound like you're talking to your cardiologist. Give or take 50 pounds, whatever.
A turbo that size is not going to weigh that much, and it's a turbo. It's cool as heck, man. They're not. I mean, I'm also go back 10 years and say like, hey, the current fleet of F-150s are going to be V6 turbos, and you'd be like, yeah, right. Pound sand, buddy. Never. They're going to be V8s, and that's it. And
but correct me if I'm wrong, and you're the engineer here, so I'll defer to you. But we're talking about twin turbo systems to avoid some of the turbo lag that happened with earlier setups. Are we not? So like, would you not need a twin turbo setup on a motorcycle to avoid 5,000 RPM comes on and the bike flips up and does a wheelie and takes away on you?
Well, you could do some twin scroll setup, so you get different exhaust going to different veins that make it so it is a more linear power curve. You can do a single setup like that. Also, depends on the number of cylinders. If we're doing inline 4s, yeah, you might want to do a twin turbo setup. But also, you start with one and then naturally you add another. so that's just you just got to figure out what's the best, and someone will do it. Now, we had a single cylinder, so it was very easy. We only needed one turbo for our little Coleman bike. But I will say this: it was a lot of fun, and it unlike most things we do at Donut, it worked. So that's good.
I'm gonna call your coworker James, who already feels that motorcycles need to chill out, and I'm gonna see if he agrees that we need to put a turbo on a motorcycle. I'm gonna get him on side.
He'll be in my camp for sure, because I think it makes good content. I don't know if anyone has done it yet. I'm sure someone has. Everyone's done everything, but we had a fun time figuring it out.
That just makes my heart sing. And Turbo Bruce, if you're listening, we've got another disciple to the Church of Boost. Jeremiah is in on turbo motorcycles, and I'm okay. Really quick, Jeremiah, imagine that SV650 that we talked about earlier. You said it's like a little bit plain Jane, kind of basic, fun bike though, good, do it all, sporty-ish, comfortable-ish, all that stuff. Yep. Imagine a turbo SV650, right?
Okay,
now you're talking,
enough. Let's move
on. It's got
on.
Extra kick. You can do second, third gear wheelies now, and it's the same size bike.
Decided you can do third gear wheelies on an SV650, Zach. I hold you to that. But let's move on.
Well,
he already agreed with you. We got a turbo on here. We don't need to belabor the point.
All right, we should probably just move on to the comments, right?
Take it away. I think in honor of episode 11. Being the episode around Highside, Lowside comments, we wanted to throw a listener comment your way. And this came in from MC3scape, wrote an email and said, I dropped my new Ducati Hypermotard 950 2 days after I got it, attempting a U-turn in a parking garage. Only the rearview mirror and the handguard were damaged, but I still felt like throwing up. I can't change my 30-inch inseam, but I can keep practicing on low speed maneuvers. My question is, would you care to share an incident or two where you dropped your bike Does it still happen to you guys, given that you're very experienced riders? And I love the fact that, they believe that we are experienced riders, and I feel like we should be using air quotes when we say that. But I thought this would be a fun one for us to go around the horn and guest honors, starting with you, Jeremiah. Is there an example where even recently in your very experienced level of motorcycling, you dropped a motorcycle in an embarrassing way that made you feel bad?
I want to be able to relate with this comment. We can be friends. We can get together and be like, hey, yeah, we've dropped a motorcycle together. But I haven't done that. I've had someone push my motorcycle over on a stand in a bowling alley in Florida, of course.
Obviously.
Yeah. But I've never done a low I mean, on a dirt bike plenty of times. Oh, are you kidding me? There have been times where I've been in the pits getting to go out to the track and, done a real slow speed turn, dumped it over that way. So so the answer is yes when it comes to any motorcycle. Never on a street bike, but definitely on a dirt bike in front of lots of people. And you know what? Everyone's done it. We've all done it. If you have never tipped a motorcycle over, and then you haven't ridden long enough, because eventually it's going to happen.
Yeah, fair enough.
Zach, what about you? Do you have an example to share?
Probably.
Well, I can go ahead. I can give on what you
first,
think of it. Yeah. So, and I think I might have shared this on the podcast before, but I had just moved to Los Angeles, and when I moved to Los Angeles, I only had a motorcycle. It was my old Triumph Bonneville, and I was working at a Sylvan Learning Center, tutoring youth. And I remember I ride in, and I'm parking the bike in the front, and there was, if I'm remembering myself correctly, there was a member of the opposite sex who was walking in, and I was trying to impress them by putting the bike on its center stand, because nothing impresses women more than the fact that you can put a motorcycle on a center stand. It sends them all a Twitter. And I was trying to do it with one hand to just be like really casual and be like, oh, look at that. Well, I got about halfway and the bike started to tip over forward, because if you're putting a bike on a center stand, you have to make sure you get those little feet lined up, and it starts to go forward, and I'm trying to then now not just use one hand, but reach over and grab it with another hand. And by this point, this 500-pound motorcycle is clearly pulling me with it. So this person that I was trying to impress was watching in like shock as the bike then fell over. I went with it and rolled on top of the motorcycle. And then I very embarrassingly had to pick the bike up and then try to get it onto the stand. She came over and was like, can I help you? And I'm like, no, I'm okay. So that's probably an example where I embarrassed myself whilst dropping a motorcycle.
Now she was into Twitter for sure. You didn't know that, but that was actually better than you just putting it on a stand.
Yeah, you got her attention. It sounds like.
Got her attention.
I don't have the most embarrassing story I can think of recently was we shot the video where we went to Texas and we competed in the motorcycle police shootout. The like motorcycle.
You got to be careful with how you use the word shootout when you're talking about the police.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It's called the shootout, but it's spelled CHUTE, like a shootout. Get it? Because it's a shoot. Whatever. The point is, it was a big competition of motor officers riding around parking lots around cones to see how quickly they can do it. And Ari and I went to attempt to compete with them. And at one point, I tipped over, made a fool of myself, and one of these kind officers came over to help me and picked up the bike, and then I was on the opposite side of the bike as the kickstand, and then he walked away being like, cool, the guy's bike is up now. And then it leaned over to the left and the bike just fell over all over again because I wasn't ready and I didn't put the kickstand down. And I needed more help than that officer realized. And there's really nothing quite as embarrassing, I don't think, as doing that in a parking lot full of motor officers, I think.
That are extremely skilled riders, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the thing I would like to say to McEscape here, who sent us this comment about trying to do a U-turn on his or her Ducati and tipping over, is that this is often why we recommend used or scratched or non-precious machines as early rides. So that if you're on something that you bought to learn, then when it tips over in the parking lot, not sad because it already had a crack in the fairing or a scuffed bar end or something like that. So, it does happen to everybody, but there are some measures you can take to try to minimize your vomit after doing it.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
And don't feel bad. It's just a Ducati,
Exactly. Yeah, 6'4" Jeremiah has never had that problem because why would he? He can just stick his leg out and not tip over.
Yeah. That's probably true. I wondered about that. I've saved my time a lot. I have what did he have? 30-inch inseam?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
there's your problem right there.
Found it.
Shave the seat. But no.
Okay.
But don't feel too bad. I always feel bad for people when things like that happen because I know how it feels. Oh gosh, you just feel gutted. You're just like, that's my brand new toy. It's the worst, but it happens to us all. And
sure.
Well, now that I know that you're the one that wrote it, I feel obligated to let you know that I can't hear the term motorcycle fairings anymore without thinking about the fact that that's a brassiere for your motorcycle. I believe the way that you described a motorcycle fairing in one of your videos, which is just gold.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember that, but sounds like something I would come up with.
Nice. All right. Well, we skipped episode 10 for those of you keeping track because it wasn't. It's a great episode, deserves listening. We talked all about gear, but we already talked about gear with Jeremiah a little bit, so we jumped over that. Last thing we want to do with our new best friend Jeremiah here is play the RevTrivia engine sound game. So this is where we're going to listen to a motorcycle start up, rev, and shut off, and then we're going to try to guess it, and we're going to see if our quote unquote engineering student can identify which engine it is. I will say this game is not easy. Very few people do well at it, so there's no pressure. And but I do think you have a pretty diverse garage and history with motorcycles, so I think you might do okay.
And just to be clear for the audience too, Zach and I are playing along. We do not know, what motorcycle producer Chase picked. We do have 3 hints to help us out, which I will read as we work our way through this. But before we do any of that, why don't we each take about 30 seconds? Audience, you're gonna take 30 seconds, and we're gonna listen to the engine sound for today.
Oof.
For those of you listening at home,
shout it out in your car.
The look on Jeremiah's face is just plagued with concentration. He's very focused right now.
I feel like it's a dual sport, and you guys did all this on purpose. I feel like you might be right, actually. I feel like this was something that I really walked into. I like to be competitive. I wanted to bring my A game, but I feel like
let's start with this. If you could guess how many cylinders does this motor have?
Sounds like 2 to me.
I think it sounds like a single.
A single?
But maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. Yeah, maybe
I think it's a single too.
No, it's a single. Yeah, it was a single. I'm sorry.
And it's kind of lopey. It doesn't sound
lopey.
Super high performance to me. I think it might be a dual sport. What's the first hint, Spurg?
The first hint today is it is considered a beginner bike. So I for what it's worth, my mind didn't go to where Jeremiah's went. I did not go to a dual sport. I was almost thinking more like a mini cruiser. I was thinking like a Honda CB. Is it the 300 Rebel? The little single cylinder that's used in the Rebel 300. That's kind of where my mind went.
Maybe.
I was replaying the starter action, and it's unique because there's that little like click after it starts. If you can hear that, I don't know if people can go back and replay it, but there's something.
It's a good note.
Yeah.
All right. So it's considered a beginner bike, huh, Spurg?
Considered a beginner bike.
All
right. Well, let's move on to hint number 2.
I gotta guess. I'm going BMW G310.
That's a good one. I
like BMW
where your head's
single.
at. Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. What's the next hint?
the engine itself debuted in 2015.
Ooh. So that could be a
okay.
BMW
I think
310,
the
right?
I think
That's
the
a pretty
310
recent engine.
Yeah, the 310 series was. I don't know if the GS was the first one that came out or the little sport bike looking thing.
Whatever,
But
it's the
either way,
same-
it's the same
same
thing.
little
Yeah.
engine, yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't have any more guesses. I think I might have it.
Well,
I'm glad I didn't say my guess because it wasn't.
did-
it
wait,
What
what
were
did
you
you
going to say,
guess?
Lexus SUV?
I was just no. I was gonna say GX470. No, I don't. I don't know. 2015 is when the engine came out. So new engine 2015. Is that the number of hints we get?
nope. The third and final hint, and actually this hint kind of solidifies, but the third and final hint is spawned a retro naked and a dual sport.
Retro
and I
naked.
thought it was a 3. I was actually with you on the BMW 310 engine, but did they do a retro naked with that bike?
Not really. No, it's like a little quasi futuristic naked bike, the G310R it's
Right,
called.
yeah.
So I guess it could be a
Is this a
Honda.
Royal Enfield?
No, it doesn't sound quite that lopey to me.
What else is a retro naked?
Well, you could consider the Honda CB300R a retro naked. It's got a round headlight, that kind of thing. So it could be a
Yeah.
Rebel 300 and a CB300R. That could be.
And
Well,
then,
what
the
is
dual,
the dual
and then
sport of it?
the dual sport would be the
That would be the CRF
yeah,
300L. Yeah. So it could
that's
be.
it. That's it. I'm glad I helped
gotta
out
be-
with this too.
The final answer is the 2015 Honda CBR 300R. I was right in my first guess, and then I let you dissuade me with your BMW talk.
This often happens. You have pretty good instinct, and then I'm like, "What if it was the?" And then it's not that at all. So yeah, really, we followed along the. That's a tricky one though. Just like a regular single cylinder engine is a tough one to get. It's sort of like asking, if you heard a car noise and it was like an inline 4, and you'd be like, "Well, I don't know. It could be a flippin' Civic or like it could be so many different things, right?"
So the hints.
So I don't think we should be too hard on ourselves. Is what I'm saying.
This one actually came in from our friend Ari Henning. He volunteered one of his personal bikes for the episode with Jeremiah. It is a 2015 Honda CBR 300R. It is no mods. And the hint that Ari provided was I actually made a piston kit for this one, and I won some races on it. But the bike itself supposedly has no mods. Ari Henning, no mods on a motorcycle. Come on.
No. He means he won some races and he modified the one that but not the model was
Gotcha.
the one we heard was the base model of the thing that he then modified and raced and did stuff on. Okay, there you go. So for all of you dying to know what a Honda CBR 300 sounded like, today was your lucky frickin' day.
Sounds beautiful.
Sounds
so
like
good.
27 horsepower of.
Yeah, it sounded so good. I thought it had an extra cylinder.
Right. That was just that rattle.
We are out of time with Jeremiah. We still have a T-shirt to give away, but we want to take a second to let Jeremiah get back to his day. We want to thank him for joining us because it was truly a pleasure. I had some good belly laughs throughout this, and hopefully our audience listening along had a few good laughs as well.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I had a blast. This was a lot of fun. I hope I made more friends than enemies, but we'll to be determined. But thank you for having me.
We'll have to go to the YouTube comments to find out.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't. You'll never have me back on if you guys ever have returning guests. But thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun hanging out with y'all.
Yeah, let's go on a ride sometime, man.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
All right.
I'm in. We'll get you out of Philly weather and then come over to the beautiful LA and go up the crest. We'll have a good day.
Your neighborhood, from what I understand, is one of the safest neighborhoods in Southern California. So
safe you can put 9 motorcycles in a garage and not have to worry about it.
There you go.
So,
Inglewood.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, man. We'll
Until
talk to you
next
soon.
time. So a pleasure having Jeremiah on, and just a reminder to everybody that is playing along at home for the engine sound guessing game. We do try to source the engine sounds from you, the listening audience. In this case, we wanted to give Ari a chance to try and stump Jeremiah, because those two know each other fairly well outside of here as well. So we wanted to give him a chance to submit his own engine sound. But if you're playing along at home and you want to send us an engine sound, you can always send us your engine sound to Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com. Please make sure to include the year, the make, the model, and any mods that you did, so that we can throw that into the hints section. And like you heard, you want to start the bike up. You want to let us hear the starter. You want to let it idle, give it a couple revs. We need the clip to be at least 30 seconds long. So that's my spiel on that.
Indeed. Now we move on to giving away a t-shirt. As a friendly reminder, the way you can win a t-shirt is to leave an Apple Podcast review. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. If you're particularly creative with it, then we'll select your review and send you a t-shirt. And while you're at it, subscribe to the podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, or our YouTube channel. The winner this time around is Mick Escape. Which,
why does that sound familiar?
If that sounds familiar, oddly, the same person who submitted that question about tipping over their hypermotard that we put to Jeremiah a few minutes ago there, Mick Escape says in their podcast review, I binged a lot of episodes while on a car road trip from Austin to Chicago on Thanksgiving, and I couldn't help but imagine I was doing the trip on my motorcycle. I still haven't done a road trip on my bike, but I haven't given up on it. Hopefully I get a chance to do it. And of course, while wearing a Highside, Lowside t-shirt. So we're going to make part of your dream come true. Mick Escape, you will get a Highside, Lowside t-shirt. You can wear it on your road trip. You can also use it to sop up oil if your engine explodes. You can do whatever you want with the t-shirt, frankly. But whatever you do, send your preferred t-shirt size and mailing address to Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com so we can send it out to you.
Now, the only caveat for us picking you is that in the year 2023, you have to take a motorcycle road trip, and
Right.
you have to wear the Highside, Lowside shirt, and we want a picture. We want a picture of you and your motorcycle wearing the t-shirt on a road trip. That was part of what Zach and I agreed upon when we picked your comment to be our winner.
True, that's right. So if we don't get a photo from you on your first motorcycle trip wearing your Highside, Lowside t-shirt, we will repo that t-shirt so fast, believe us.
We will come to your house and push your Ducati over again, and then take that t-shirt away from you. But no, you have a year. You have a year to do this road trip, so we think you can do it.
Yeah. And speaking of years, that's the end of this season.
Whew.
We're at the end of the 12th episode of season 6. We do thank you so much for hanging out with us. A friendly reminder to leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or send us an email to highsidelowside at RevZilla.com and tell us what you think about the show. We are open to feedback, and we so appreciate you hanging out with us for 12 episodes yet again this season.
I think that's the takeaway for me. You know, it's we're Zach and I. The way the production for this works, we're going right back in. You know, we're going to probably have about a 3 to 4 week window of kind of downtime before we have to jump back into, starting to pre-pro season 7. We made some changes to season 6. I think some of them have worked out really well. I think the fact that the engine sound guessing game seems to have been a real success. A lot of people have written in that they enjoy playing this along. What I would say is, as you're readying your keyboards for comments that you're going to email us, if you have any constructive criticisms or feedbacks or suggestions for Zach and myself, we'd love to hear them. We do try to read through all of those, and not that we're going to take everyone to heart, but we've kind of tailored the podcast in a way where we feel like maybe we're starting to get the hang of this thing a little bit as we've made our tweaks to season 6. But we're always trying to evolve and improve. So if there's any suggestions you have for Zach and myself as we start thinking about season 7, which will launch in a few months here, please don't hesitate to drop us a line.
Indeed. So the final reflective moment at the end of the episode, the final episode of the season, Spurg, what do you take away from today's episode?
I very much enjoyed getting to meet and hang out with Jeremiah. I think that
I agree.
during pre-production and some of the calls that we had and getting to speak with him, outside of what is going to be shown in the episode, I genuinely had some really great belly laugh moments. And then the other part of that was, and maybe you feel this way as well, maybe you don't. I mean, obviously it's been a crazy year, and this season has really reflected maybe like 6 or 7 months of that. And crazy in a good way, in a fun way, and the stories that we get to share and the stories we get to tell. And I think that my reflective takeaway, with some of the things that happened towards the end of my personal life last year and everything, it was just, I'm very happy to have the podcast, and I'm very, I consider myself very lucky to have this forum to come on with someone that I consider a friend, and to be able to host other friends and other key people in the industry and talk about motorcycles. And some episodes are a little bit more surface level, and some episodes are a little bit deeper. But I think, for 2 or 3 hours a week, this is what we get paid to do. And I don't want anyone to ever think that that's lost on us.
Well said. Very well said. I like that. Well, what I learned is to be careful who you cross at a Florida bowling alley, because it sounds like they'll tip your bike over if you're not careful. So that's a good takeaway from
the fact that you haven't known that before now in life is surprising to me.
Man, what can I say? I guess I've always just made friends, not enemies, at bowling alleys. But good thing to keep in mind. You don't want to cross the wrong person.
You clearly haven't spent that much time. You haven't spent that much time in Florida. That's the problem.
No, I have not. That's true. That's true. Well, anyway, everybody, thanks so much for hanging out for another season, for another episode. We hope you got a kick out of the conversations that we had this season and today. And by gosh, we hope you'll join us for season 7 whenever we get around to making it. Thanks so much for hanging out, everybody.
Until next time.